Hi good people, Steve Moshangi is my name, and today I want us to look at the life of the richest man who has ever lived, and is none other than King Solomon. King Solomon has been declared as the richest man in history. I don't think there is any billionaire in dollars or even in pounds that has been able to be wealthy as King Solomon. And so today I want us to look at some of the principles that King Solomon employed for him to become wealthy in business and in his financial life. And number one thing that King Solomon did is King Solomon loved the Lord. King Solomon loved God so much. The Bible actually says, if you read the book of 1 Kings from 3:1-14, that King Solomon loved the Lord with all his heart. And I believe this he learned from his father. The Bible says that King David was a man after God's own heart. David was a man after God's own heart. And when you read the book of 1 Kings from verse 3 to chapter 3:1-14, you will realize that King Solomon actually followed after his father's footsteps. That's what made him to become king. He followed after his father's footsteps. He had somebody who represented God in his journey. He could follow, and that was his father David. So King Solomon loved the Lord. He knew that God was his source. He knew that God was his everything. And I believe this posture enabled him to become who he was in terms of business and in terms of wealth creation. All right. The other thing that King Solomon did was to ask God for wisdom. When King Solomon gave, because he was also a giver, and it's a strategy that we also need to learn. King Solomon was a giver, but I'll come to that. He gave 1,000 burnt offerings, and that night when he slept, God came to him through a dream, and he asked King Solomon, "What do you want me to give you?" Because God was pleased with him. And King Solomon didn't ask for riches. King Solomon didn't ask for power. King Solomon didn't ask for a lot. In fact, one of the things that amazes me is that he was like, "Lord, I am not qualified even to become a king." And this is something that should encourage you. Sometimes you feel you're not qualified to run that business, you're not qualified to handle that kind of money that you want to handle, whether it's in millions of dollars. Let me tell you, you are a candidate, because King Solomon felt like that, yet he was a child of a king. King Solomon had his own disadvantages. Imagine what people used to say about him, because we all know how King Solomon was born. King Solomon was the second son of Bathsheba with David. The first son, you remember, died, and David, washed himself after he mourned for him, and he started eating. We all know the story. So you can imagine, even when he grew up, what people used to say. That son whose mother was a former husband who the father had killed. You know that story. And I believe those stories used to fly. Because people are people. So King Solomon had disadvantages, but one thing that God did is that he saw this man is depending on me, and he asked for wisdom. And God did not just give him wisdom, but God gave him knowledge. God gave him not knowledge, God gave him a lot of wealth. God gave Solomon wealth and riches. If you look at what is written in the Bible about what King Solomon owned, it will amaze you. All right. So the other thing that King Solomon did is King Solomon talks about diversification. King Solomon diversified in what he traded in. King Solomon traded in gold. King Solomon traded in precious metals, not just gold alone. He even had he had different associates who he would do business with. He did business with kings. For example, when he was building the temple, the king of Tyre gave him timber. They traded. King Solomon knew how to trade. He traded his wisdom. Remember when Queen Sheba came to visit him, and Queen Sheba left a lot of gold to him because of the wisdom that King Solomon had. this was what King Solomon did. He diversified, and you can see it even from the book of Ecclesiastes in 11:2, which says, invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8 you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. So he diversified. So it's good to diversify. Don't just invest in one thing, diversify, because you don't know about tomorrow. And he talked about diligence and laziness in the book of Proverbs. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. King Solomon knew the importance of diligence and hard work, and it's a strategy that he employed. You can look at his life and you can see this man was so diligent. Look at the people he employed. Look at the people who used to work for him. He had a lot to do, and he accomplished it. The last and not least, King Solomon was a wise steward of what God had given him. He talks about it and says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. He talked about the importance of managing managing what you have, saving, budgeting, and being prudent in spending helps in preserving wealth. And these are some of the principles that King Solomon had. And through this, I hope that you can learn something from this story of King Solomon. Thank you, and see you next time.